I work as a staff member at a shop within a large hospital. I had no particular complaints about my job and was generally satisfied. One night, while I was walking inside the hospital for some errands, I encountered a commotion. It seemed a hospitalized child had started suffering. I saw a new female doctor struggling with a difficult intubation. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't perform the procedure calmly. Judging the situation, I took the tube from her. "Let me try. I can do this." As she watched, astonished, I successfully completed the procedure, leading to an unexpected turn of events. My name is John. I'm a 35-year-old ordinary guy you could find anywhere in the country. I work as a staff member at a shop. Even though it's a shop, it's different from a supermarket or a convenience store. It's a shop located inside a hospital in New York. It's quite a large hospital, frequented by outpatients and those accompanying inpatients. Not only patients, but doctors and nurses from the same hospital also visit the shop. In the early mornings and just before closing time, it's not unusual for the shop to be crowded with people in white coats. $10, please. During lunchtime, a senior nurse came to buy her lunch. She picked up a sandwich, a bottle of tea, and a small pastry. She seems to have a sweet tooth, a bit of a struggle for someone in the medical profession. After giving in to her cravings, she ended up buying these. "Here is your change." After ringing her up, I bagged her items and handed her the change. She took it, opened her clasp wallet, and clinked the coins in. She put the receipt in the bag with her purchases. "Thank you." She whispered her thanks and walked away from the register. As I watched her back, I also responded, "Thank you." Although it might sound like a scripted line, almost robotic, I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart. "Can I have this, please?" "Sure, just a moment." Next at the register was a little boy. Given that he was wearing hospital clothes, he's likely an inpatient. He looked to be about 5 years old, holding a robot and a monster toy in his small hands. Standing behind him was a petite woman. She's probably the boy's mother. The total is $10 for both items. "Here you go." She placed a $10 bill on the tray. We sell food and toys catering to various needs at our shop within the hospital. Hospitals aren't exactly fun places, and for children, they can be downright scary. We try to offer a selection of compassionate items to help them get through tough times a little easier. $10, exactly. Here's your receipt. I handed the receipt to her and the toys to him. "Thank you so much." He thanked me with a bright smile and a lively voice. "Please come again." Cheered up by his energy, I waved goodbye to them with a smile. And so, I work at the shop like this. It's primarily a standing job, which can be quite tiring, but there are energetic kids like the boy earlier who share their energy with me. Huh? But then again, this is a hospital. It's not uncommon for children to become scared and start crying. Mule. A baby being held by his mother in the line for the register started crying loudly. "Oh dear, he's gotten fussy," I thought to myself as I worked through the line, eventually reaching this mother and child. I'm so sorry. The mother apologized to those around her, looking embarrassed. Despite her talking to and gently rocking the baby, who seemed about a year old, there was no sign he was going to stop crying anytime soon. "It's okay. It's a baby's job to cry, after all." I reassured her while scanning the items in her basket. The baby continued to cry the whole time. The surrounding glances gathered, and she looked even more apologetic. All right, time for my secret weapon. After finishing scanning the items, I handed over the change and the receipt. Right after that, I pulled out a pinwheel from under the counter. It was a red pinwheel, made of plastic film attached to a handle. "Look, it goes round and round." I spun the pinwheel in front of the crying baby. Sniffling, he looked at it curiously. On his arm, I noticed a hospital band with the hospital's name, the room number, and the name Michael Brown. It seems he's one of the kids admitted here. Round and round, round and round. As I kept blowing on it to make it spin, he became interested in the pinwheel. His face lit up with a smile, a stark contrast to his earlier crying, and he reached out his hands towards it, giggling. "This one's on the house. Here you go." "Thank you so much, I'm so sorry." After I gave the pinwheel as a gift, she expressed her gratitude with a shrinking demeanor. It's rare these days to meet someone so humble. I sent off then with a smile, impressed. Phew, glad that didn't escalate. The line at the register ended with that family. Another staff member is taking care of restocking. It looks like I can take a breather for now. Just then, a woman rushed up to me. I thought she wanted to pay, but she didn't seem to be holding any items. That was amazing. He stopped crying so quickly. She's a doctor from this hospital. Wearing a blue scrub topped with a white coat, she had a red name tag hanging around her neck. I remember, she's the new doctor who recently joined. I'm a doctor, but kids get scared of me. They start crying, saying, "Mule, scary face." She laughed, scratching her cheek. Despite her lovely smile, there's nothing particularly frightening about her. She's probably just so focused on her work as a doctor that her face stiffens up on the spot. That must be tough. Glancing at her name tag, I saw emergency medicine written on it. I see. Working in emergency medicine means dealing with a wide range of ages, from adults to children. She might also struggle with issues like she mentioned. I'm not exactly a favorite among children either. Without little tricks like them, I'd be at a loss. Saying this, I pulled out a plastic bag from under the counter to show her. Inside, there are several pinwheels, paper-made toys, and candies. All of these are intended for situations like the one earlier. That's not true at all. But she shook her head, denying my words. You're always loved by everyone, kids and elders alike, as a cashier in the store. Her eyes sparkled as she looked straight at me. The intensity was overwhelming, and I couldn't help but feel taken aback. Really, you think so? Yes, absolutely. The nurses say they find your service comforting. I'm envious of that skill, she said with a slight laugh. Then, with a graceful motion, she picked up a ham sandwich and a can of coffee near the register and placed them on the counter. Could you please check these out for me? Feeling awkward about being praised for my customer service, which I hadn't given much thought to, I went ahead and processed her purchase as usual. I made a point of sticking to my routine while handling her transaction. It felt like I was being audited. Feeling oddly tense, I bagged her items and handed them over. She smiled again, expressing her gratitude. Thank you very much. As she was about to leave the register, flipping her lab coat, she stopped and turned back to me. Oh, right. My name is Olivia Smith. Let's have a chat again sometimes. Sure, I'm John. After exchanging names, she waved contentedly and left the shop. Well, that's an interesting connection. I've already got someone special in my heart. I just hope this interaction with the beautiful doctor doesn't lead to any strange rumors. With that thought, I resumed my work, as if to dismiss such arrogant notions. Since that day, Dr. Smith has made a point of greeting me every time she visits the shop. It's not unwelcome, and having a bit of non-work-related chat is a nice break. This had been the case for some time, but she engages with other customers in line, either initiating conversations or responding to them. No dessert today. That's right. It would be too much to have it every day. This was the veteran nurse, who seems to have finally overcome her cravings. Dr. Smith gets along well with her too. Her communication skills are impressively high, making her fit into the workplace so well that it's hard to believe she's a newcomer. Thank you for always keeping it clean. Much appreciated. Not at all, doctor. You too. Hello. No classes at the university today. Hello. I have a late lecture today. She greets everyone with a smile, from the janitors cleaning the hallways to the university students working part-time in the shop. Hey, put on the job. Don't get too carried away. One night, just as it was about to become a new day, I had some errands in the pediatric ward. As I walked down the hallway towards my destination, I noticed an unusual noise for the late hour. What's going on? Prioritizing the commotion over my own errands, I headed towards the source of the voices. Approaching, I realized the noises were coming from a particular room. This situation didn't seem normal. Michael. When I got about 10 meters away from the room where the commotion was happening, I saw a woman sprinting around the corner of the hallway at full speed. Wait, haven't I seen her somewhere? Michael, hang in there. The next thing I heard was Dr. Smith's voice. She was driven by anxiety, a stark contrast to her usual demeanor. Excuse me for a moment. Curious, I peeked into the center of the commotion and saw several doctors and nurses treating a child. A familiar red windmill was decorated at the patient's bedside. I see, the person from earlier, and the name Michael. It must be Michael, who visited the store yesterday. Of course, I'm concerned for anyone in distress, but it's especially worrying when it's a familiar face. Without thinking, I reflexively jumped into the hospital room. Michael. Dr. Smith's frantic shouts caught my attention. Her hands were trembling, and it seemed like she couldn't maintain her usual composure. Dr. Smith was pale and confused, holding a thin tube in her hands. Excuse me for a moment. I snatched some documents related to Michael from a nurse nearby. Hey, who are you? The surprised nurse's words didn't reach my ears. I skimmed through the file. Michael had asthma and was hospitalized for it. The tube won't fit. Dr. Smith was struggling, and Michael seemed to be in pain. He had a croup-like cough, and epiglottitis was suspected. No wonder she was having trouble with intubation. The swelling narrows the trachea, requiring a certain level of skill. Nurse, please call a pediatrician immediately. Yes. With no time to worry about the sudden outsider, the nurse dashed off, ignoring me. But would help arrive in time. In such a condition, breathing difficulties could arise at any moment. Actually, he might already be experiencing them. Thinking this made me restless, and I impulsively called out to Dr. Smith. Let me try, I can do it. Why are you here? She seemed not to have noticed my entrance, focused as she was on the situation at hand. Let me try, even though you say that, John, you work in the store, right? Quickly, Michael is still suffering. Dr. Smith was even more confused by my words. Indeed, I work at the store. Well, no wonder she's confused. I have a medical license. I almost forcibly took the tube from Dr. Smith, who stood there frozen. Then, I proceeded to insert it into the trachea of Michael, who was in distress. It was significantly swollen, indeed challenging. Without real field experience, it would be tough to manage. Well, John, you don't just stand there admiring. Get the medication and oxygen ready. After completing the intubation, I urgently directed her and the remaining nurses. I could feel their questioning glances, wondering who I was. But time was of the essence. It seemed like everyone there shared a sense of urgency. A little while later, his condition seemed to have improved slightly. The peak of his distress had passed, and his coughing was gradually subsiding. Just then, the nurse who had dashed out earlier burst back in. "Dr. Wilson, over here." Oh. The pediatrician, Dr. Wilson, who entered the room with her, widened his eyes when he saw me. It also seemed like he gave a slight smile at the same time. "I'll take over from here." He stood by Michael's side and quickly assessed the situation. Then he continued speaking to me. "Thank you, John." His treatment continued. As an experienced doctor, his skills were evident. Each action was quick yet precise, and his instructions to the nurses were clear. "Let's leave the rest to him." "Yes." Encouraging his son, Dr. Smith, we both left the room. I leaned against the wall in the hallway, waiting for her to calm down. Though I intended to wait, she spoke sooner than I expected. "Really, how pathetic I am." Tears welled up in her eyes, and her voice trembled. "Intubation in that state is difficult. It's understandable for a novice doctor with little experience not to manage it. It's about gaining experience from situations like this and improving. No matter how much you study and train to become a doctor, the actual field can differ significantly from the ideal. I too have felt this starkly in the past. John, but I couldn't do anything for him as he suffered. That's what frustrates me." The tears that had been welling up fell. Every doctor has their specialty. Even Dr. Wilson, an expert in pediatrics, would probably find neurosurgery challenging, and I doubt he can perform heart transplants. So don't beat yourself up. It's about finding your strengths going forward. I intended to comfort her with these words, but she was still crying. That might be true, but it's still frustrating. I can't always make children smile, nor can I save the suffering ones. Maybe I really can't do anything after all. I regretted my words a bit. In situations like this, what's needed isn't advice. It's words that affirm the person who is feeling down. That's not true, Dr. Smith. I deliberately addressed her with the title doctor to protect her dignity as a doctor, because I thought she might otherwise become self-critical. Your instructions were precise. Sending someone to call Dr. Wilson was the right decision. It's fair to say that your judgment saved Michael. After I spoke those words, she wiped her tears with a handkerchief and whispered a quiet thank you. At the same time, she nodded repeatedly, as if savoring my words. Then she asked me a question. "John, you were actually a doctor, right? A life-saving one at that, to perform such a difficult procedure flawlessly." Having somewhat recovered, she now seemed interested in my story. "With such impressive skills, why do you choose to hide them and work in the store?" As I spoke, her face, without me realizing, had brightened up as usual. If I had to point out anything different, it would be that her eyes were bloodshot. I hesitated about whether to share my circumstances. I hadn't done anything wrong, nor did I have anything to hide. I was just afraid that talking about it might reopen my own wounds. But brooding over it forever wouldn't start anything new. "Come with me." Deciding to open up, I asked her to follow me. Turning around, I started walking down the hallway. Her footsteps echoed as she followed behind me. Weaving through the hospital, I led us to a certain room. The room's lights were off as we entered. "This is a private room for a bedridden patient, right?" "Yes." As she said, a single girl slept by the window at the far end of the room. Only the light by the bedside was on, and 2 folding chairs were set up. "You must be tired. This is going to be a long story." After prompting her to sit, she did so with a puzzled look. Then, I turned to the sleeping girl and gently touched her face. Placing my palm on her cheek, I stroked under her eye with my thumb. As expected, she showed no response. Amelia Taylor. Seeing the name on the wristband, she seemed to grasp what I was about to say. Could this child be yours, John? Yes, Amelia, 3 years old. My daughter. She's been in a coma since birth due to an accident during delivery. She's never opened her eyes. Not even once. As I revealed the truth, she covered her mouth, a look of shock crossing her face. When Amelia was born, my wife, Emma, lost her life. She had a placental abruption, and an emergency surgery was required. The response was quick, but the uterus didn't contract, and she bled out. Amelia was deprived of oxygen, leaving her brain damaged and in a coma from the moment she was born. While Emma was fighting for her life, I was swamped with an entirely different task. I only learned about the severity of my wife's childbirth after everything had ended. At that time, I was a busy emergency medicine physician. That day, too, I was performing emergency surgery on a patient from a traffic accident. Phew, that was close. Yeah, John, you're as skilled as they say. I'm not really. It's all thanks to the support from my seniors. Relieved after the surgery, I had such conversations with the senior doctors. But the cheerful atmosphere suddenly changed. The sound of hurried footsteps approached, and then the door was flung open. A breathless nurse, with tear-filled eyes, looked at me. Dr. Taylor, please, come quickly. I had been notified about entering the delivery room, so I was planning to head there soon. Thinking casually that my child must have been born, her expression filled me with dread. Her face was far from celebratory. Following the nurse, I found Emma peacefully asleep. Her face was serene, showing no signs of distress. Holding her cold, white hand, I knelt down and wept loudly. A grown man, crying unabashedly, shedding large tears. Emma, Emma. A large stain formed on the sheets. I shouted until my voice was hoarse, but she never woke up to chide me for being too loud. That day, the patient I was in charge of miraculously pulled through. I was thanked profusely by both the patient and their family, but I couldn't genuinely accept their gratitude. It wasn't that I couldn't accept my wife's passing. I just wished I could have fought alongside her until the end. I wasn't there for her final moments. She never got to see Amelia after she was born. And Amelia has never seen her parents or the world, remaining asleep. Our family was torn apart, suspended in midair. Since then, my spirit was broken. I couldn't work as a doctor anymore. Amelia's primary physician became Dr. Rodriguez, a pediatrician and my mentor. I see. I couldn't bear the thought of our family remaining divided. I decided to stay close to her by working at the hospital store. Thanks to Dr. Wilson's kindness, I'm allowed to stay overnight with her a few times a month. It just so happened that this coincided with the commotion involving Michael. I'm sorry for asking without knowing your situation. Dr. Smith, sitting next to me, fidgeted with an apologetic look. I was about to reassure her that it was okay, but she was the first to speak. But I want you to return to medicine, John. Excuse me. Her unexpected words took me by surprise. She then shared her past with me, looking downcast. John, I lost my best friend in an accident. They had plans for the next day and even for the upcoming holiday. But those plans never came to fruition. I wanted to reduce the number of people dying from sudden accidents. That's why I chose to become an emergency medicine doctor. Her usually gentle demeanor was filled with determination and strong emotion. But after the incident with Michael, I realized how inexperienced I still am. That's why, John. What? I was startled by her sudden approach and raised my voice unintentionally. It echoed down the hallway, likely causing a disturbance. I wish for you to return as a senior in emergency medicine. Please, let me call you my master. Master. Her unexpected words left me astonished. Despite my shock, she continued. I've always felt a sense of urgency. Despite having lofty goals, my skills didn't match up. I was trying too hard to fit in to cover that up. To me, her behavior had always seemed natural. I thought it was just her being herself, but it seems I was mistaken. That's why I envy your skill, John, if you're willing to return to medicine. I'm sorry, Dr. Smith. Her words truly meant a lot to me. But the trauma from that day still held me back. I can't sort out my feelings yet. Is that so? But I won't give up. I'll keep asking you until you're sick of it. She declared this emphatically. Weeks passed since that day. I was working as usual at the store, handling the queue of customers at the register. Then it happened. Whoa, what was that? A loud thump sounded. Unable to stop the register, I continued my work, albeit distracted. Did you hear that noise just now? Yes, it was quite the impact. I wonder what happened. That's the thing, you see. An older lady mentioned that there had been a traffic accident on the main road in front of the hospital. Apparently, a bus and a large truck had a head-on collision. Several compact cars were involved, turning it into a major disaster. Some people saw the victims being brought to this hospital. John, please, we need your help. We're short-staffed. Dr. Smith arrived at the store, out of breath. Coincidentally, there were orthopedic, neurology, and cardiac surgery conferences today, so there were fewer doctors in the hospital. Wait, No time, let's go. Hey, Dr. Smith. Despite my reluctance, she forcibly dragged me to the scene. Just then, a college student working part-time arrived. Hey, take over the register, please. While instructing him, Dr. Smith led me away without further resistance. People were being brought in one after another, and the hospital was reaching its bed capacity. It felt like a battlefield hospital, and I was genuinely shaken. John, perfect timing. I need you for the next patient. Daniel, a fellow emergency medicine doctor I used to work with. He was surprised to see me for a moment but quickly got back to his duties after relaying what was needed. Instructions were thrown at me before I could even prepare myself. There was no time for second thoughts. My body moved on its own in such circumstances. The patient brought in was a young pregnant woman. Her belly was significantly swollen, and a man was calling her name from a distance. This must be some kind of trial. Needless to say, the patient assigned to me was the pregnant woman. She had a laceration on her right arm from glass shards and seemed to have a fracture. Worst of all, there were signs of a severe blow to her abdomen. Immediate treatment and a C-section were needed to save both the mother and the child. Damn, why am I remembering this now? Emma's face flashed through my mind. Bound by that vision, I involuntarily stopped my emergency treatment. John. Dr. Smith, who had come to assist, snapped me out of it. Shaking off the distracting thoughts, I focused on treating the patient. I regained my composure and gave instructions to the nurses. We need to treat the arm and perform a C-section simultaneously. Get the obstetrician here. Yes. Cries, groans, and shouts filled the air in the waiting area. Amidst all that, I found myself in an oddly quiet operating room, beginning to suture the pregnant woman's arm wound. It was a surgery where every second counted, a moment of intense urgency. My hands trembled with a familiar kind of anxiety I hadn't felt in a while, but I had no choice but to do what I could. Reassuring myself, I managed to make the final stitch. The bleeding stopped as the wound closed. The fracture seems like it can be fixed with manual reduction. Relieved, I wiped the sweat from my forehead, and almost simultaneously, I heard a baby's first cry nearby. "The baby is born safely," the obstetrician announced, and the operating room burst into a collective relief. The patient's vital signs stabilized. Thank goodness, really. Amid the cheers, I quietly shed tears. The accident was caused by the truck driver falling asleep at the wheel. He had a chronic condition and had taken medication with drowsiness as a side effect. He's hospitalized in a local hospital now, receiving treatment. The pregnant woman I operated on is also on her way to recovery. Her baby was in the NICU but was soon moved back to a regular ward. Though her dominant arm is broken, making childcare challenging, her husband seems kind, which is reassuring for now. While walking down the hallway with these thoughts, I happened to run into that family. The husband was holding the baby, with his wife beside him. "Dear Taylor, that's you, isn't it?" "Yes, I'm John Taylor." As I introduced myself, the couple's solemn faces lit up. Their baby was sleeping in the father's arms. "Thank you so much for everything. We'll never forget your kindness." "It's nothing. I was just doing my duty as a doctor." Though I said that, they kept thanking me over and over again. Seeing the lively couple, I felt proud to be a doctor. That night, the hospital had calmed down and returned to normal. In a room, I spoke to my sleeping princess. "That's what happened. Impressive, right? Daddy did well." Of course, there was no response. Suddenly feeling empty, I was reminded of the past. The funeral, dealing with relatives, and above all, the sorrow of loss that prevented me from celebrating Amelia's birth. This guilt was the main factor hindering my return. "Amelia, would you support me if I said I wanted to return to being a doctor?" I looked at my daughter. "Haha, your eyes and mouth are just like Emma's. I'm looking forward to the day you wake up, Amelia." Just as I gently stroked her head, whispering to her, "Amelia," I caught a slight movement of her finger out of the corner of my eye. I grabbed her hand and called out, "Amelia, Amelia." But there was no response. Well, things don't work out that conveniently, do they? I was excited for a moment. But I quickly regained my composure and sat back down in the chair beside the bed. At a glance, her face seemed to be smiling. Eventually, I chose to return to emergency medicine. Dr. Smith, who calls me master despite my protests. Daniel always laughs, saying she's like a shadow following me around. "Daniel, John is not a goldfish, that's right, he's an orca." Despite the collective eye rolls, Dr. Smith doesn't seem to mind. My working hours and shifts are flexible due to Amelia, which I'm grateful for but also feel guilty about. I intend to do my best with what I can. It seems like Amelia's hand movements have been increasing. Perhaps as I take steps forward, she is following suit. She can't walk or talk yet, but I always dream of going home with her someday. Recovery from despair takes time. How long it takes depends on the individual's mental state. Perhaps I've taken quite some time. For about 3 years, I had averted my eyes from my profession as a doctor. But I have recovered now. For Amelia's sake, I can't stay stagnant forever. What's lost won't return, but memories live on in the heart. Cherishing them, I vow to look forward with hope. Remembering my wife's smile, that was my pledge.